TotalEnergies is planning to explore for oil off the South African coast, that's the west coast. The French explorer, it proposes to drill one well, which could result in an additional 9, depending on the success of the first drilling. Now, community and environmental activists in South Africa have blocked seismic surveys, and they've increasingly opposed such activity, including through the courts. Well, let's talk to one such person now, and her name is McDaid. She leads what is called the strategic lead at the Green Connection. Liz, good morning to you, and thank you very much for your time. Can we start with the area of interest by TotalEnergies? Where do they want to do this exploration exactly, and why would you be against it?
So what we are seeing is that the company, the French company, Total, has arrived in South Africa and is now embarking on what seems for us to be an onslaught of applications to drill in the oceans. So the one that you've mentioned, which is off the deep water, the Orange Basin, off Onderklip, and off the west coast there, that's the third one that we have been asked to comment on in the last couple of months. And it's difficult to understand why we are getting 3 applications for a similar area, and the consultants are providing us with studies which are almost cut and paste. And what it's really meaning is that for ourselves and for communities on the ground, we are constantly having to go to public meetings to say the same thing over and over again. So for us, it's like, what is actually happening? And remember, I don't know if you or any of your viewers know that in about 2012 or so, our sea was kind of divided up, and it seems like it was leased off or sold off to these international companies. Last year, we ended up with Shell off the east coast. This year, it seems to be Total off the west coast. And you have to ask your question, or we are asking our question, what is this rush to try and drill for oil and gas off the South African coast right now, when we are supposed to be doing a transition away from fossil fuels towards an energy plan of some sort?
Yeah, well, you talk about, or you raise that question as to what is the rush? The authorities will respond and say, we have load shedding. We would like to end load shedding. So you ask, what's the rush? That is the rush. Is it not urgent?
But how is that going to end load shedding when it takes, according to Total, about 10 years to get one well, and that's only if they find oil and gas, to a production level where they will be putting the gas, taking the gas out. The second question you have to ask is, who is going to buy this gas, and is it going to be South Africans? Because gas is something, an international commodity. You sell it internationally, you get the best price. So because of the Ukraine-Russia war, gas is, of course, very high. It's a nice thing if you've got it to sell. You can make lots of money. So whether the people of South Africa will gain from foreign companies coming here and drilling out our oceans is debatable. But what we do know, as with many mining communities will tell you, is once those companies leave, the burdens fall on the local communities. Yeah. And all of those fishers, tourism, all of those local people who have livelihoods right now, we believe those livelihoods will be compromised. And we're supposed to be about creating jobs, not losing them.
We'll talk about the destructive activities, and as you suggest, that gets left behind by these companies. But for the time being, and I like how simple this conversation is going, because that's when an ordinary person is able to understand exactly what we are talking about. How do you respond to those who say you are blocking development, economic development at that?
Whose economic development? right now there are people on the coast who are earning a livelihoods from fishing, from the support services that go with fishing. Like someone has to mend the net, someone has to provide the repair services for the boats. There are people who are processing fish, people who are selling them. So there's a whole lot of knock-on activities, local economic activities. And then you have, those who want to come to the beach in December, and they stay somewhere, and they have their food and their entertainment, and that's a whole economy. Transport, and all of that is now going to be potentially at risk. So when we say economic development, whose economic development? Because what it seems to us is that the rush is about exploiting a resource, the oil, selling it, and then the idea that potentially government might get some tax off it. So I guess I don't have to, or rather I can just ask the question is, where have we seen that happening?
Well, I suppose, Liz, for those people who believe the story of the Gulf states, they are said to be rich in oil. And are their citizens living happily in gainful employment? Potentially, the answer is yes. So why would South Africans not want such development taking place in their own backyard if indeed we do have oil in this country, if indeed we have gas in the country?
But where are we going with that? Because, even the oil states are starting to realize there's a thing called climate change. So is this a resource that we should be exploiting into the future? I sort of know what you're going to say next, but I'll...
Let's move the conversation forward. Let's talk then about what becomes an eyesore, and that is no laughing matter, because if we look at the destructive activities of mining companies and what they leave behind, people get their waters contaminated. There are those who live so close to these abandoned mines that now the wind that blows the toxic stuff, they get sick in their lungs. Is that the kind of destructive behavior that comes with oil and gas exploration? Explain this to us in simple language.
So very simply, I think this is what we've experienced in other countries. So when you look at Nigeria and you look at the Delta, and I think there are just more than enough videos of what has happened there, showing how the water is got an oily sheen on it, how the fish are maybe sick, you can't use them anymore. I think we only have to look at Mozambique and we see that what has happened there has been a lot of conflict, social conflict, and we've seen that people have had to be moved from their land to make way for infrastructure associated with the oil pipeline, gas pipeline. So I don't think there's any doubt that of the local impacts that take place when these companies arrive and if they get their infrastructure going.
Yeah.
But so I think that's the question is that as a country, are we being asked to have a discussion about this? Is there a national space for the country to say which way should we be going in energy? And there is a law. We have a law that was passed in 2008 by Parliament, which says that we need an energy plan. In other words, if we're transitioning, where are we going? Where's the plan? What's the plan? And everybody has a right to have their voice in that plan. So that's in the law. But strangely enough, since 2008, and we're now in 2022, the president has not put that piece of law promulgated it, has not gazetted it, it's not signed it in, so it's not applicable. So we are sitting in this no man's land of having the right rules that would enable us to assess all of these different energies and looking at oil and gas, looking at what it can give us, what it can't give us, what are the risks, what are the benefits, and giving us as ordinary South Africans an opportunity to participate in that conversation. So that at the end of the day, we would have an energy plan that we're all happy with, that leads to less load shedding or no load shedding, and it's revised every year. So every year we can check, okay, what's happening in the world, who's going which way, and where should we go. But we don't have that. So that's what the Green Connection is aiming to do, is actually to take to court just to get that piece of paper signed. Because we think that, that will give us a plan. That gives us space for us as people of South Africa to actually have a say in who comes into the country and who exploits what resource and what we get out of it.
Final question to you. And it's interesting that you're ending your thought with that very issue of the plan, that you're saying you're going to court in order to get this plan. The Minister of Energy will always, in public platforms, say there is what is called the IRP, Integrated Resource Plan. That's the Mixed Energy Plan. Is that not sufficient?
No, because that is an electricity plan. But what we need is something to look at the whole of the energy. So in other words, liquid fuels. How are we going to drive our cars? What about, like how much gas and oil are we going to bring into this mix? And the IRP also needs updating. The IRP's electricity plan also needs updating. So it's from 2019, which means the data that would have gone into it is a year or two old. And we're in 2022. There's just so much new technology we see around us that we have no clue about, or I don't, that I think we need to have on the table, have these discussions and say, so where do we want to go in the future? We can't have a static plan, and we can't also have an energy minister that wakes up each day and says, okay, well, today I'm going to push for seismic surveying of the ocean. Tomorrow I'm having lunch with Total, whatever. But we need a plan that all South Africans can be part of.
Liz McDaid, let me leave the conversation there. Thank you very much for your time and indeed explaining this to us in simple language. I also feel a bit educated now. And Liz McDaid is a leader of an organization calling itself Strategic Lead at the Green Connection. When we